I'm Francis Dodds, Editorial Director at Burley Dodds Science Publishing, and in this video I'd like to talk about one of our exciting new titles promoting pollination and pollinators in farming. It's edited by Emeritus Professor Peter Kevin and Dr. D. Susan Willis-Chan, both the University of Guelph in Canada. Part 1 looks at understanding pollinators and pollination. Part 2 looks at threats to pollinators, whilst Part 3 looks at ways of promoting pollinators and pollination. Well, to give you a better idea of the wealth of information in this book, I picked out a couple of chapters to look at in more detail. First is from Part 2, and is Chapter 6, on how neonicotinoid insecticides affect bees and other pollinators, and that's written by one of the editors, D. Susan Willis-Chan. Neonicotinoids are particularly important because of their widespread use, persistence and effects. This chapter discusses a wide range of research on how neonics affect both managed and wild bee populations. It reviews levels of environmental contamination and how this affects topical and oral exposure routes. The chapter also addresses the key issue of sublethal effects. It includes a number of case studies showing the effects in practice of neonics on a range of bee species. The second chapter I wanted to pick out is from Part 3 and is Chapter 10 on altering crop management practices to promote pollinators. It's written by Jose Franco of the USDA and Rachel Mallinger of the University of Florida, also in the US. Pollinators are impacted by a lack of diverse floral and habitat resources associated with intensive monoculture cropping. This chapter summarises current research on how different spatial and temporal approaches to cropping can better support pollinators, for example, use of row crops, specialty crops, perennial orchards and perennial forage and pasture systems. Well, I'll conclude by quoting two leading experts. The first is Professor Simon Potts of the University of Reading, the UK, and co-chair of the UN IPBES Global Assessment of Pollinators, Pollination and Food Production. And he's said, now more than ever, we need to sustainably manage pollination services to bolster global food and nutritional security. This book brings together an internationally excellent team to synthesise state-of-the-art knowledge on the threats to and mitigation responses for pollinators and pollination in agro-ecosystems. It promises to be a go-to reference for academics, agri-food industry, policymakers and NGOs. And the second expert is Professor Jeff Ollerton, Visiting Professor of Biodiversity, University of Northampton in the UK. And he said, the editors have assembled a wonderful set of researchers to present the latest findings about the importance of pollinators, why many populations are declining, and what can be done about it. This volume promises to be a widely read, state-of-the-art account of an essential topic that will be a useful resource for years to come. Well, we think there's a real buzz about this title and hope you agree too.